Hello, welcome back to our live with that thing. Looks a bit bare, doesn't it? Anyway, it's time for change. Yes, it's a Tuesday, which hasn't changed. It's me on your screen, which hasn't changed. And I've got a weird shiny forehead going on. Sorry about that. But what has changed, obviously, in the last week is the logo for Capture One. Amongst other things, it's not just logo change, there's some other things under the hood, which we will cover a little bit today. But mostly, we're going to do what we always do every week, the bit that hasn't changed. We're going to edit your photos. We've got some other stuff in there to show you today around some processes and some tools and some other stuff. But ultimately, we're going to spend the next hour together, for those of you that are online, in that piece of software, that program called Capture One, which is written by the guys out in Copenhagen in Denmark, and it is a raw processing software. So a raw processor software. Don't know what's the plural of processing softwares? Anyway, we will hopefully cover a load of different subjects today that touch on how to get the best out of that piece of software. The raw processing software out there is varied, let's call it that. There are different versions of it, different software companies make it. This session focuses on the one that comes from those guys, and it's the one that I happen to use in my business. So there we go. So for those of you that are online, please make it interactive. Talk, chat, well, not talk, type away. I assume you're all beautiful. You could all have three heads, so you all get to see me. I don't get to see you. So it can be really, 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 really lonely if this is really silent. So please do interact, heckle, interject, disagree, agree, come up with other ideas, whatever. But we're going to start off today with some obviously different things. Well, not obviously. For those of you that didn't know, there was a big event last week for Capture One. Some people think it was too big. Some people think it was too small. We'll talk about that as well. To George's point, let's give the beta a try, but don't spend too much time on the studio-only options. We will not. Why? Because most of my stuff is landscape or cityscape or commercial. And that doesn't involve generally shooting people. As lots of you will have seen, the latest release, or the upcoming release, has a heavy steer towards people. Of course, we will cover that very briefly, but we're going to talk about the tools in the way that we can use them as landscape, cityscape, nature, architecture, industrial, commercial, whatever photographers. So, the version that I would have said today, up until this point, we would be using is that one. That is the latest stable release of Capture One, which is 16.5.10. Did I get that right? Yes. My preview's over there. So, 16.5.10 is the latest stable release, and this is very important. As of last week, it is available to download. There is no more NDA. Imagine this, we can talk about the beta stuff without being sued. How forward looking. This is the beta version, 16.6.0. Beta 1, if you have a look, and you will notice the logo has changed. So if you're on this version, well done you, you're on the latest. If you're on this version, punchy you, you're on the you're on the risky one. And I want to cover that very quickly. So if you are using the beta, which we are today, we're going to be using that version, we are absolutely taking on board the risk that it can go wrong. It might crash today. That would be quite fun. And if it does, I'm going to send all that data across to Capture One so that they can make the stable release exactly that, stable. If you want stability and you do not want to risk your system crashing, your software crashing, your photo editing being lost halfway through because of something weird going on, I would recommend you stick with this world for now. Until the Capture One guys say, yep, we're ready to go, and it becomes gold and off you go. Now, another subtle change, or nuance in this. 16.5.1, or 10, sorry, if you were on 16.5.9, 0.8, 0.7, 0.6, whatever, and you bought it as a perpetual license, you were able to go up to 16.5.10 included in that license. If you'd bought a previous version, so 16.4, 16.3, or earlier, then that's not included. So, what happens 16.5 to 16.6 is a perpetual license owner would need to pay to upgrade. So be aware of that. If you subscribe, it's all included. No issue. So there's again, I love this phrase because I use it too much probably, but life's about choices. So Rick, to your point, I agree with Roger. I'm not sure what Roger said. Oh, sorry. Let me just cover that so we can all refer to the same thing. So, Roger, I thought the new developments were very disappointing. As a landscape photographer, I felt like I had turned up to the wrong party. Okay. Hold that thought. Rick, I agree with Roger. Underwhelming. No reason I can see to upgrade my perpetual license. So, my view on the world, and we'll talk about what's in and what's not in a minute. If you have a feature set that you're happy with in Capture One, and your camera is supported, and your operating system is supported, and you're up to date, and you don't see anything coming through new that's going to be interesting to you, then you don't have to upgrade. There's no need. No one forces you to always be on the latest perpetual license. You don't have to do that. If you're on a subscription, then you have access to the latest version anyway. Always. It's your choice. But if you're on a perpetual license, you've got to work out whether or not it's worth it to pay for an upgrade to a version of software that may or may not give you features that you don't necessarily need. And that's going to come down to the feature set. And that's down to you, your decision, your mindset, your budget, everything around that. No one is going to force you to go to 16.6. The only scenario where that is going to be an issue is if, for example, in a year's time, you buy a new camera that's not supported on 16.5.10, as it will be at that time. Or the operating system gets forced to upgrade, and unfortunately Capture One of previous doesn't support it. Now, interestingly, there is always generally a bit of a shoulder, a bit of a margin, so something critical or something about an operating system minor change. In history, Capture One have tended to keep a couple of versions prior patched, as it were, but just bear in mind that no one is forcing you to subscribe. No one is forcing you onto the latest version. If you don't see features that you like, why would you buy it? If you have a TV and they launch a new model number of that TV, but it's got features that you're not going to use, you wouldn't buy a new TV just because it's new. You'd buy it because it's got a feature that you want. And the same would apply to software. So genuinely, I wouldn't suggest to people just blindly upgrade. Roger, I switched from subscription to perpetual yesterday. Absolutely. So this is the other thing to bear in mind. If you've been on a subscription with Capture One and you wish to come an off-ramp, as they call it, onto a perpetual license, depending on how long you subscribe, there's a discount in your perpetual license. So you can off-ramp, and then when you're ready, if you choose to, then go forward. Powell, will Paul use beta portrait retouching tools on his portrait? We'll talk about that in a minute. And yeah, Rick, so agree with what Paul's saying. You were hoping for better tools for landscape until then. I'm happy with 16.4. And that's the key thing. Use the software that you're happy with. And keep that in mind. So the changes. Let's talk about last week very briefly. Where shall we start? Let's start with this one. So not only has the wording slightly, or the font slightly changed, and it's designed to be reminiscent of the lens etchings on the barrel of a lens. Kind of is. If you actually write out, f2.8 to whatever 5.6 or whatever, you'll see that in the Capture One font it actually looks like a lens etching. But obviously the biggest change has been the change in the logo, which is also designed to be around a lens, about moving a lens around. So we've gone from the original Phase 1 era logo with a big 1 in a circle, in a blue circle, to the, let me just pull up a Grover pointer for you, to this one, which was the previous one until last week. And then last week, this one unveiled. Interestingly, there were some 50th birthday cakes made for this little head, Mr. Grover from Capture One, with the Grover pointer on the top of them. But more importantly, this is the icon that you will see in your dock when you're either putting in a beta or eventually when it goes to the next stable version. Last week's event. So genuinely, it was packed. It was quite nice, actually. It was at Holborn Studios, very famous studios. Lots of different sessions. Now, here's the fun one. Normally at a Capture One event, I'm sort of in the, let's call it the behind the scenes, but I know what's going on. I know what the technology is. We might even be presenting stuff. We might have presented stuff for it. This one, because of its subject matter, I turned up as a guest, which is kind of fun. Quite interesting for once. I could heckle. But in those sessions, they were talking through e-commerce, they were talking through studio, they were talking through portrait, they were talking through skin retouching, they were talking through everything that I don't do. Now, Does that mean that I've been excluded from this software release? Well, no, actually it doesn't, because under the hood, there's also another load of things, which is performance improvements on certain systems. Mine is included in that, luckily. But there's stability stuff, there's new support stuff in there. So it's not just a case of the headline features give you all the toys, there are other reasons to upgrade if you choose. But it is fair to say that this release was heavily steered towards studio and portrait photographers and commercial stuff in studio. So I've seen quite a lot of this online. The argument about the fact that there's been a deviation away from studio and people and so on. And I've seen this really powerfully put about where did landscape go? And what people are referring to is the menu on Capture One. And Capture One's new website is all clean, all white, all clinical, all very. It's very much. It's think of a photography website that's not black, including ours. It's the opposite. It's white. It's kind of weird. But on the top menu, let's get up our Grover pointer. How dare they? Under the types of shooting, portraits, fashion and beauty, product and food, wedding and events. No landscapes, no cityscapes. So they've obviously removed us from existence. Only they haven't. Because if you looked at the previous version of the website, it also didn't have that stuff on there. So there's an awful lot of frustration, let's call it that, and I get it, that the genre that we tend to gravitate towards isn't featured on there. But I can tell you now, it wasn't. That there, this one here, is the Capture One website just before the new one was launched. And it covers fashion and beauty, portraits, studio, product, still life, food, wedding, events, journalist, documentary. I mean, there's a couple on there. You know, journalism's disappeared. But it doesn't mean they've disappeared. All it means is what Capture One are now focusing on. They're focusing their marketing efforts and they're focusing their business efforts on, to that extent, is where the bulk of commercial photography is taking place. And that is in portrait, in studio, and in commercial. So, of course, we can all use the tools. And I'm going to cover some of the tools that I think we often forget about. All of the tools that are in there are useful to us for landscape and for cityscape. If it wasn't, my entire business wouldn't work if I was using an editor that didn't cover the genre that I shoot in. So nothing has been taken away from landscape and cityscape people last week. What's happened is we have a release which has got an awful lot of extra stuff added in for portrait and studio photographers. And that's a good thing, because it means that Capture One are adding things into those genres. We had a release not too long ago which had HDR merge and panoramic stitching. Well, if I'm a studio or a portrait photographer, useless to me. But we didn't see the pitchforks then, because people understand that there'd be cycles. And this is the current cycle, which absolutely, yes, this release has a focus on people. Should the event, have been as, let's call it, well publicized as it was, bearing in mind it was going to pick on just a smaller set of genres, maybe not. That's for marketing people to work out. But nothing's been taken away from you, from me, from any other landscape, cityscape, commercial photographer. All that's happened is someone else has got some new toys, and we should be happy for them. Where are we? Brian, we should be happy that Capture One is staying competitive for all genres of photography. Many photographers shoot a variety of things for income. Interesting point, variety of things, and we'll come on to that in a second. So, before we do that though, I want to pick up on and have a little quick discussion about color gamut, because it came up today, and I think it was Mr. Evans who asked the question. And it's about this one. Borrowed this image from Wikimedia Commons. The question was, what profile should I be editing in? In other words, should it be ProPhoto? Should it be Adobe RGB? Should it be sRGB? Should it be... So here's the challenge. I'm going to put... Oh, we're overusing the Grover pointer today. I'm really sorry. Right. This horseshoe shape behind the triangles is the actual visible color gamut. So what we can see as visible color. There is not a electronic rendition of that color gamut that covers the entire shape. Just doesn't exist. But you've got some that are smaller and some that are bigger. The bigger color gamuts are more difficult and more expensive to render on a monitor, in print, in anything on phones or whatever. If you wanted a pro photo full 100% color gamut on a phone, if you think an iPhone's expensive now, wait until you see it in the future. So instead what you have is you have different cut downs of color gamut, and frankly they become easier and easier and more generic and more easy to rely on the smaller they get. So in Capture One we can choose our color editing space. We can choose to use ProPhoto, arguably the largest one on this diagram, this big triangle here. We can use Adobe RGB, which now, and I wouldn't have said this a few years ago, but now most good studio displays will be able to show pretty much 100% of Adobe RGB, and most printers are able to print it. Very important. Then we've got sRGB, a very much cut down one. So sRGB is almost our generic profile that you know within a certain amount of tolerance. If you send your picture that's saved in sRGB to any screen in the world that's been made in the last probably 15-20 years, it can display it. And the point being, it can display it exactly how you see it yourself on yours. So it's about reliability of output. On the web, we still have to put stuff out as sRGB. Why? Because if I put something out as ProPhoto and the end user or viewer's screen can only display sRGB, what happens? It maps and it chops. And I can't control what that person sees. And actually what they're going to see is probably muck. So although it sounds like we're giving up, as it were, producing to the lowest common denominator gives you consistency, but you're giving up or you're trading color depth. So if I had a printer that could print 100% of ProPhoto RGB and a monitor that can display 100% of ProPhoto RGB, and I'm editing in 16-bit out of a Phase 1 camera, then of course, why wouldn't I shoot and edit and print and produce in ProPhoto RGB? It gives me the most natural likeness to natural color gamut. This huge, great big area behind. In fact, it goes beyond it in some ways. I can't guarantee that. And I can't guarantee that my customer or my viewer or the recipient is going to be able to see it properly. And that's the risk. Further to that, paper plays another part in it, because the way that papers render color based on the ink that's fallen on it, so not only is it down to the printer, it's also down to the paper, that color gamut can shift as well. So this isn't about what's the best. It's about knowing your recipient, knowing the audience, knowing what you're rendering to that's most important. What's the best color profile out of those ones on the screen right there? ProPhoto. But that's useless if it means that everything I give to someone is seen as mush. Then we've got the fun thing that's coming along now at a rate of knots, which is HDR. And I don't mean traditional HDR, let's make everything flat. I mean when 255 is no longer the brightest. 255 becomes our baseline, and we can make things as bright as the sun on our screen. So not only do we have challenges with color gamut, we also have challenges with effectively the bit depth. So almost, well, for one of the better way of putting it, 32-bit color, which is going to be a whole new world, because a printer cannot print something the brightness of the sun. There's no bright sun ink. We can only go as bright as the paper it's printed on. At the moment, for the person watching this in 30 years' time that's invented nuclear paper, I apologize, I got it wrong. But for right now, that's the world we're in. So please don't get your head buried in this weird tangled mess of arguments over, well, I use Adobe RGB, I use ProPhoto, I use sRGB, whatever. If you're producing for web, the safest print space or color space to use is still sRGB at the moment. P3, which is, I don't know whether it was Apple that brought it along, but anyway, certainly Apple devices and Apple screens will have P3. P3 is most closely aligned to Adobe RGB, And most printers can produce Adobe RGB, and most monitors can display Adobe RGB. So what color space do I use? That one. But that's personal choice. So please, please don't go down the rabbit hole of just following blindly. This is the best, because the best may not be good enough for your audience. Right. Since I've asked you to contribute, let's just cover some of these and then we'll get into Capture One, shall we? Jim, I use Capture One because I shoot Fuji, which is more supported than Lightroom. Absolutely. The Fuji stuff that Capture One have done is great. Let me just pull Jim's thing back up. Sorry, I was just doing that so you could see it better. But let's do that. Yeah, Fuji was more supported than Lightroom. Absolutely. And actually, the Fuji integration with the film styles and so on is fantastic. I play with it with mine. It's great. I just prefer editing on Capture One compared to others, Lightroom, Photoshop. We can say it. Yeah, I do. My workflow is around Capture One. My workspaces are around Capture One. That's one of the reasons that I do it, because I like Capture One. I like the way that the process works. I like the software. So why would I switch to something else? Rick, agree about variety being important. Agree there was an earlier release that did some good landscape tools. That was my last upgrade. Now waiting for the next one. Perfect. Take it. Remember this. They're not pushing it to you. Take the versions that give you the most. Now, I remember a couple of releases ago, a couple of point releases ago, there was the change, if you remember, to the Keystone tool. It made it a bit easier for us lot. Who in portraits is using the Keystone tool? So, it comes in cycles, and that's okay. It's just this one came in quite a heavy cycle. David, I just wonder how many of those multi-person studios are out there. I know of none around here. I can tell you a lot is the answer. There are a lot, and I met quite a few of them last week. There's big business out there in that stuff. Paul, in practice, only imaging professionals use a correctly profiled viewing device. Yes, and there is no current electronic device or print capable of rendering ProPhoto RGB, however well calibrated. Exactly. So just be careful. Now, there is let's just flip this around the other way. I'm going to pick up on something Powell's just said. So ProPhoto is basically used for calculation purposes. Displaying it is not yet possible. Right. If I had the choice to edit the photograph in the first place, of course I would pick to edit in the biggest color gamut that I can display and record. Why? Because I can always go down from that. I can always shrink down and I can do my interpretation. I keep control of it because I do the conversion here for output. But I can always shrink a color gamut. What I can't do is edit in sRGB and then say, oh, I want more colors, because they don't exist. So yes, absolutely, ProPhoto gives you that. So does Adobe RGB, and it gives me the ability to shrink it down to a color gamut that other displays can display. I can't go the other way. So I'm not saying don't edit in the best gamut possible. I'm saying be aware of what really is the best one possible for your setup, your screen, your printer, your calibration, and then work it out from there. Right. Love this question each time. I don't know what your name is, but if only it would work with Hasselblad. It takes two to tango. I might leave it at that, but there's a hint in there. Yeah. In the meantime, enjoy Focus, which is Hasselblad's version of their editing software, which no one seems to really enjoy. But anyway, enjoy. Right, let's go away from color gamut. Sorry, Jim, put your color thing back up, and we're going to go into Capture One, and we're going to go into Capture One as a beta. There is our Capture One. Looks pretty similar, right? 16.6 to 16.5. Couple of things to bear in mind. When you load in a beta, anything, like I said at the beginning, anything you do is at risk. Also bear in mind that if you upgrade your catalog or session type to the beta, it means that you can't go back to use it in a previous version of Capture One. So be very careful. If you are going to use a catalog from one to the other, make a copy of it, use it as a beta version, and literally treat it as if it could go away tomorrow, because it might go away tomorrow. So bear that in mind. Whenever you load up a catalog into a beta version or a future version, it will ask you if you want to upgrade the database. Once you do, you can't go back. Now, what is interesting in this is the latest version of Capture One, the 16.6. In fact, let me just show you something quickly. Whenever you load up a new version, a new beta, new version, whatever, you may lose your workspace, especially if it's one that introduces a new tool tab like this one, the little happy face. If you've lost your workspace, oops, sorry, wrong window on. Go to your workspace and you will find the million workspaces that I have saved. And I've got in there my 16.5.10. However, the reason that Capture One will reset your workspace when you do an upgrade is because they want you to see the new tools. The risk is if they kept your old workspace, they're releasing these new tools and you don't see them. So you've got two choices. You can load up an old workspace and you can add the new tools, or you can load up the new workspace and you can add your old one. So I'm missing my color tab here. Go up to here, add tool tab, color. There's my color tab. I don't like it sitting there at the end because of my weird mind workflow. If I want to move it, command key or control key, hold that down and move it across. Now I've got my color tab back. So, question. Powell, because I did not test it, would it be enough to delete the new catalog file from beta and go back to the automatically created backup file? Arguably, yes. So Capture One will create a backup file. You could delete the newer version, yes, and you can go back to the previous one. That's probably messier than most people want. My suggestion would be duplicate the catalog before you do any loading of it. So duplicate the catalog, call the new one beta or whatever, and play with that, because then you've got a visual reference that you don't care. B, it's less messy just in case you forgot to go back. So there's our new tab, this little fun one, the little face. We'll talk about that in a second. But to all intents and purposes, most stuff in Capture One is pretty similar. Now, one person asked me last week after the event, what would it be that I want them to fix in landscape or for landscape photographers? So I have actually said two things to the product management guys, so this isn't hidden. Number one, I would like, for some reason, like my cursor to start working again. I would like this tool, merge to HDR, and this tool, stitch to panorama, to either be improved or go away. Sounds weird, right? The reason that I want them to do one of those two things is at the moment, in my view, these aren't quite up there. They're not as good as the other tools that Capture One produce. They were great starters, but they sort of got a little bit neglected. Merge to HDR does a good job in that, most importantly, it creates a raw file out of it, so it's not flattening the file. So for that, I love it. But on the other hand, it doesn't let me paint in areas and do some of the stuff that a decent HDR tool typically would. Stitch to panorama, same thing. So if I'm using my Phase 1 XT, so a shiftable sensor, it does a perfect job. 100% of the time it stitches it perfectly. But if I'm using a nodal rail or a spherical projection, sometimes Capture One gets it wrong, and I don't have the pixel editing tools to be able to edit it, which is really frustrating. So I would like those two to be improved. And if they're not going to be improved, just like with focus stacking, I would rather Capture One turn around and say, do you know what? They're not going to get better, but we recommend, or we've partnered with a plugin called X, and they find the best one and they make it integrated. That would be great. Either way. The second, and the reason you can probably guess this picture is up, is noise. Because, yes, the noise reduction in Capture One is simply not good enough. I said it. There we go. We're not precious here. Here is my EIP. This, and don't get me wrong, this is a relatively old camera. This is it's the Canon EOS R. It's actually what I use as a webcam here. And at ISO 1600, it's got some pretty nasty noise. It's not as bad as previous cameras used to be, but it's not quite up there. And if I start sharpening things, you can see it starts going a little bit too crusty, a bit too crispy. We don't like that either. So there are tools like Denoise from Topaz, which will give it a go. Still leaves it a bit crusty there. That one just smooths everything out, which is a bit weird. This one really smooths stuff out and creates artifacts. This one, bit of a mix in between. But as you can see, there isn't really a perfect solution out of that particular tool. Other tools, DxO do a denoise function, which does a decent job. But my challenge on this, and I'll go back to this, I don't want to see Capture One create an almost good tool, or it's okay, but it needs more work, denoise. I want them to spend some proper time on it. I want them to actually get some real heavy lifting in there and create some software that we would all sit in and go, oh my God, this is the best noise reduction in the world. Short of that, my worry is we end up in the same place as these, which are, they're great functions. They produce a raw file, which is perfect in many ways, but they're not quite there. So I'm in a place of, those are the three things I would love, but I don't want them to just rush to appease a landscape person with a pitchfork saying, where's my new toys? Hopefully that makes sense. I'm hoping that that sort of resonates with some of you guys, because it's not about I want new toys now. It's about I want the best toy, and I'd love to know that it's on its way. That's all. So let's cover your comments, then we'll go into editing. We're going to do some editing. Yes. Craig, can we quickly review how to set color editing and proofing color spaces in Capture One? We can quickly today, but we'll do maybe an in-depth one in the future as well. Rick, does duplicate the catalog mean just database stuff in the normal Capture One catalog backup, or is it the actual image files? No, so it depends. It depends is the answer. If you've saved your images in the catalog itself, so you have not a reference catalog, but a hosted catalog, it means, so what I'm referring to when I say duplicate, I mean in Finder or in Explorer, taking the catalog file, copy, paste, duplicate it, literally that whole file as a container. That container contains the database, but it also contains, if you have saved it within there, the images. I'd never recommend you have catalogs that have embedded images personally, but if you have done, if you have a catalog that is 40 gigs worth of images, you're going to end up with two catalogs that are 40 gig. If you have a catalog which is a referenced catalog, which is what most people will have, your raw files sit over here, your catalog is here, you're going to duplicate that. That might be 1 gig of previews, something like that. You duplicate that to a new one. You've now got two 1 gig catalogs, but you still have the same single set of raw files in the same place. Where are we? Leica used to ship Capture One with their cameras until they became competitors with Phase One in the medium format market. So number one, they're not. Number two, it wasn't anything to do with Phase One, Paula. It was commercial with Capture One and Leica. Tim, pano stitching kind of works for me, but HDR merging works very poorly for me. People have different successes and failures with it. But yeah, Ryan wants batch processing of HDR images. I don't disagree. Prasad, yes, HDR and pano tools need one more proper release. I agree. HDR merging gives me weird histograms, issues surrounding lights. So I've not had it to that extent. Typically it's worked okay for me, but yeah, just it's one of those things where Capture One have made it very clear last week. Two things. Number one, they do not see AI as a replacement for the photographer. They actually, if you have a look at the live stream, you'll see it. The photographer is at the center of photography in their world. The second is we are only going to produce great tools. So this is about having a roadmap that they can stick to, that they can build on, that they can deliver premium products and premium tools for a premium market. And if we get the benefit out of that, then great. Quite right about the best tool, no pitchfork here. There are many pitchforks, unfortunately, Rick, but we'll work them out. Right. So let's get into, so I'm not going to particularly go into noise, but obviously we do have a noise reduction tab in here. It does do a reasonable job, but it's a little dated in the way that it approaches it, and I'd like to see more. Okay. Two things, the two big things that changed changing next week, week or after, whatever it is. You get the beta, have a play with the beta carefully. The first thing is new sessions. There is a new function within sessions. If you use sessions to organize your folders and stuff, some people do, one per trip, one per location, whatever. You've now got the ability, not only with some automation, and in the studio version of Capture One, it's even more automated, but you can now add subfolders with tokens. So you can say, like in this case, session name, but you could also say the image sequence number, you could say the date, you could say whatever you like, or you can put in manual subfolders. So I'm not going to go into huge amounts of depth in this. Genuinely, if you play with sessions, play with this in the beta. But you can create yourself a session, and now you can create automatic subfolders, so you're not stuck with just capture, select, outputs, and so on. You can create a myriad of different fun and game folders in there. to be able to organize your shoot into different days, different locations, different, in the case of people, different models, different product, all of that sort of stuff. Second, our retouch tab. No face detected. Sad. Now, I did think about using some models that I've shot over the years, but I figured, well, we need a bad example of pretty rough stuff to work with. So we're going to use me. So this is me in Shanghai. This here, and the nuance here is really important. I'll come onto it in a second, but I would challenge any landscape photographer to say that they haven't shot people. They don't shoot people. You must be like me, where because you have a camera, you get invited to weddings and parties and all that sort of stuff. Not because they want you, but because they want your photos. But one way or another, we all shoot people. We do it on holiday. We do it when we're traveling. We do it as part of it. For me, I do it as behind the scenes stuff, and we'll talk about that in a second. But every day, pretty reliably, I look a bit rougher than I did the day before. I've got weird line things I never had. So this tool, really simple. Let's just do it very quickly. Blemishes, dark circles. We can see the difference that's happening live on the screen. We can even out my skin a little bit. That smooths it a bit. We can, with texture, ooh, weird thing going on. It's weird. Only a JPEG. Calm down. We can remove texture and make me look completely plasticized and Barbie, or we can add some texture and get some more detail in there. And because I'm very strong and manly, we can add some contouring, which makes me look rugged. Excellent. Now those things looked like very minor changes. But if I go my before and after, there's my before, there's my after. And I would argue I still look relatively natural, but it's just given me a bit of a fresher look. Now to take that another way, here is me after 3 days of no sleep in Iceland in battering winds. There we go. That's not smile, that's tears. Anyway, yeah, glasses suck. New for me for last year. Right, in this case, I really do have some baggage going on. So let's fix some blemishes a little bit. Now, blemishes is actually very cool. It gets rid of little spots and things that we don't want. So something there, I probably hacked away at that board in the car. There we go. I've got a slider that can, to a different amount, move it. Now, if it's doing too much, we'll come on to that in a second, but there's my blemishes. Right, dark circles. Ooh, eyes. Well, they're gone, or back, or gone, or back. And you'll notice it's not doing it hugely unnaturally. It's not just pasting stuff. It's not just cloning stuff. It's actually using natural features to try and soften it out. I can even my skin a little bit, but I want to add in some texture because I don't want to lose all of that. And let's add some contouring again, character. Yeah. So again, let's go before and after. So you notice it hasn't touched the landscape. It's not touching that. It's literally recognizing faces. We go from there to there. It's subtle, but I look a lot less screwed in this version. It will detect multiple faces. If this has gone too far, I've got an impact slider at the top. I can pull that back to say no impact of what I've done. So this is like a global adjustment for all of that. Up, down, up, down. Great. Now, the nuances. Here's the fun one. Number one, this works in tethering. So for those people that do shoot people, I know that's not a lot here. For the people that do, you've all done it. I've done it. Oh, don't worry, it will look nicer when we're finished. Don't worry, it'll look better. Well, now this can happen automatically because this can apply to next capture, next capture, next capture. And you can apply this as a style. You can apply it to every single photo in a batch. You can apply it as they're coming in tethered. And people get that just soften. It's just not as harsh as a camera actually makes someone look under studio lighting. But that's not the winner for that's a little nuance. It's quite nice. Couple things. Number one, this is editing the raw. Now these are JPEGs underneath it, but it's editing the raw. I'm not having to create a huge TIFF file to go out and do it. These are iPhone photos on the front-facing camera. It's doing a good job with it. For behind-the-scenes stuff, it's going to make you look a little less knackered as a landscape photographer. But the killer is this. Why am I excited? I'm not excited by this. I'm excited by this. Because if we could retouch faces, and just to be clear, this is my opinion, none of this is on a roadmap that I've seen. But if I can retouch faces and automatically remove blemishes and things that are distractions, I could remove litter. I could remove contrails. I could remove pylons. I could remove wires. I could remove annoying ghosts of things in long exposures. The potential for this tool is quite interesting when I think that Capture One have chosen not to put it under the Detail tab. They could have done, but they gave it its own tab, the Retouch tab. So maybe there's more to come. Anyway, let's just cover some of this stuff that's come in. Where are we? Lock fee, yeah, it's a fantastic position to have. Photographer at the centre. Exactly. Let's get rid of my knackered face off the screen and go for something slightly less knackered. JD, I heard about the new sessions from another photographer. It's exciting for me because of how I shoot. And not just for fashion photographers. The session change works for people on multi-day landscape shoots, on commercial shoots. You know, if we've got a shot list of 16 locations in one hotel, at the moment we'll have it in one big folder. Well, that could be split out into each location, for example. Yes, Blue Steel, Oliver. We're working on it. Power, they need to have a wrinkle removal. Maybe that's coming. Roger, I'd like to see the new impact slider added for all tools. It's not a bad shout. We have at the moment, obviously, you can add a layer. So if I create a filled layer, and obviously I can make all my adjustments and have the opacity slider. So it's kind of like an opacity slider, but for one specific tool. Not quite the same thing. Yeah, we'll get that in post. Don't worry. Exactly. Right. Tim, good point. Let's see them first adding AI masks for skies, trees, mountains, buildings, pylons, contrails, and litter. Yep, I would like to see that. However, what's also interesting, if you think about it, the people masks. We now have lots and lots of people masks that we can choose from, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on separate masks, which means that in current Capture One, before I've even started, if I wanted to separate out the people mask, and by the way, how this works, if I go to create that as masks, and I go to, oh, I didn't hit separate masks. So now I've got my individual masks, and if I press M for mask from the keyboard, I can see my sclera, which is a word that I just never liked. Pupil and iris, hair, lips, eyebrows, face, blah, blah, blah. Great. But I've already started with 7 masks. I've got a limit of 16. So if I start adding in things like landscape-specific masks as well as people, I'm going to start hitting that limit soon. So I wonder how quickly we're going to have to see a limitation change, especially as computers have got more powerful, to increase the number of masks, or layers, sorry, from 16 maximum at the moment to more. Right. Hopefully, that's all we're going to do, ever, on this release, because as you rightly point out, a lot of you, it's not geared towards landscape photographers, but you do need to know that the tools are available. And as I say, most of us as landscape photographers still shoot people sometimes, including ourselves, for behind the scenes. I just need it on video now. Right, Georg's image. Georg's concern with this image, let's just go back to the before and after. It's not a landscape, by the way. Is this reflection here. So he has created a layer called reflection to try and get rid of it. My suspicion, Georg, and I haven't actually looked at the layer in detail because I was prepping a load of other previews for other stuff. My suspicion is this is going to be 90% about masking and not a lot about the reflection. You don't want the reflection. Completely get that. It is distracting. Without your layer, it's sort of more distracting. With your layer, it's less distracting, but it seems a bit weird. So what's going on? Let's look at your mask. And if I want to look at the mask on its own in isolation, Option key or Alt key and M, get a grayscale mask. So this is a Luma range mask that has also been painted around here. I don't think that's the right mask. I think it's going to need to be something different, and I think that's what we're going to play with it now. Okay, so let's have a little look at what we could do instead. So what I've done is I've cloned the variant. So right click, clone variant, and that means that we keep Georg's version. We're going to work on my version instead. I'm going to remove this reflection layer, and if we look at what the layer was, removed all the highlights, removed all the whites, reduced some brightness, a bit weird, reduced exposure. I'm not sure that's the right fix either, but the idea, I think what Georg was going for is, if I select the brightest parts of the reflection and pull them down, I don't notice it so much. But obviously, as you can see, it hasn't really worked. So instead, let's use our AI brush. Let it fix that mask. And it's doing weird things because it's getting confused by some stuff here. But let's go with that, because I don't have an existing layer selected. It's created a layer called AI mask. And I'm also going to include, hopefully, some of this. Why is it not getting that? That's a bit annoying, isn't it? It's not quite grasping what I want it to do. So with AI mask, typically if that happens, you're just going to zoom in a bit more. And we hope. No, you really don't like it, do you? Don't know why I'm talking to a computer. Bit weird. AI, spooky, isn't it? We started talking to it. Getting there, but it's not quite hitting the mark. So let's use a magic brush. And I'm going to turn off sample entire in photo. I'm going to remove the tolerance down to its lowest, because I'm going to rely on the fact that I've got this bar around here, this black line. And if I click on here, it should... too much. Didn't work. Trying to be clever then, it didn't work. Right, we're going to have to go manual. Scary, but we can do it. Don't worry, people, we can do this together. We're going to manually draw a mask, just like everyone used to for decades before we started relying on AI tools. And it's almost like when the tough gets going, what is it? When going gets tough, the AI tools get going. So manual mask, 100%, 100%, quite a hard edge. And I'm just going to include everything inside this panel. We may want to replicate the same effect elsewhere, but for now we're just going to worry about this panel. If I ever want to draw a straight line, click where I want it to start from, hold down the Shift key on your keyboard, click at the end, and it will draw a straight line. So here to start, Shift key, end, and it draws a straight line. Here to start, Shift key, click at the end, and I didn't quite go high enough. There we go. Fill that in a little bit. It's good. And we just make sure this is completely filled. And we're going to check this with our grayscale mask. So even if you don't have a tricky mask, I would still always encourage you to turn on your grayscale mask, just in case there's stuff that's either included that you didn't want or not included that you did. But that's good enough for me. I'm going to refine that mask a little bit. Now, not too much. You can see how disastrous that would be. And in fact, let's just go on to a grayscale version so you can see that. Refine it too much, it's getting the whole of the car too much. I'm going to pull it to here, because I just want it to soften around the edges. A tiny little change. Apply. What I want to do, I want to get rid of the contrast, right? And we may play with the healing brush as well in a second, but to get rid of the contrast. Well, number one, let's pull down contrast. Number two, let's pull down clarity. Number three, let's use some adding of dehaze. So click down here to add haze, but I want to add, choose my shadow color, this panel. So we go from there to there. Now, if that's going to be too odd, which I think it probably is, we've got to find the right color to sort of blend. This is too much, obviously. Right color to blend. And then we might find that the dehaze or the rehaze and the clarity reduction is just a bit too much, so we add a bit of structure. Anyway, if I just look at that layer on its own, we have reduced it. It's just not perfect, and we're going to have to play with color and stuff like that. So I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to pull it down to halfway, almost like that impact slider we were saying. It's got a bit brighter, so I'm sort of trying to match this here. So let's just pull down exposure a touch. Okay. And we go from there to there. But we're going to talk about a problem in a second. As a result of doing that, you notice that I've now got a disparity between this light here and what's on here. Because originally we had these streaks going across. Well, all of that reduction has got rid of it. It's sort of lost it a little bit. And we're losing the blue a little bit. So we start chasing our tail. Maybe we go into the color editor. We bring up a little bit of the cyan. Maybe we bring up some blue. Let's just work out what this one is. Yeah, it's blue. So let's bring up the saturation a little bit. Bring down the brightness. Well, what are we doing? Down or up? Let's just see. So it's almost like a paint shop, right? We're trying to match what's there. We have reduced the shadow, but it's not perfect. So instead, let's go to a healing brush tool. And I'm going to be very careful where I pick from. So I'm going to choose, rather than letting Capture One do it automatically, I'm going to hold down the Option key or the Alt key on Windows, choose a source, and paint. And you notice I'm not doing it in one go. I'm going to choose a source up here and paint. I'm going to choose a source here and paint. And just to be clear, this is not going to be perfect. You notice I moved the source a little bit. In fact, let's just move that source to here so that I can keep that same black line. And maybe I go here for this bit, and you get the idea. We're very, very carefully picking good bits of paint to use over the bits with too much reflection. But there's still a problem, because even though I can get away with this, and that's what we're doing, we're getting away with it. Just remove that little bit out of the healing brush. It no longer really looks real. So if I go away from my healing brush, move that back, it now looks really flat. So I'm a big advocate for absolutely go to the max, press your sliders to 11, and then use opacity or impact as the retouch tool has to pull it back. Same with the healing tool. Pull it back, not gone, but just maybe to there. Because I think this still looks realistic. There are still some reflections on there, but it looks a bit better than this. So, and there's a reason that when you're doing proper automotive photography, you're controlling every ounce of light. You've got flat boards, you've got flat lights, you've got black boards in there to put negative fill in there. You are controlling everything that's landing on that car, because cars are a real pain when it comes to reflection, light, all the stuff around it. But oh wow, if you're going to do that, it's not going to be in this museum. So I'd be in a place personally of doing a little bit of a lot of stuff and just blending it. Roger, would skin tone and smoothness not help? It may do, but I think we're going to end up in a weird place with the whole car. But let's give it a go. So new layer. Let's just, for the sake of it, pick on anything which is this color, bearing in mind I'm doing it over the top of what we've already done. I'm going to tick the box to say view selected color range. It's going to turn everything else into grayscale. And I'm going to increase this, because I know there's quite some variety, to anything that is bluey purple and so on. And then we're going to, let's just turn that off. Zoom into here. With that, we're going to say our uniformity, make the hue very similar, make the saturation very similar, make the lightness very similar. The problem is it's not quite really even got this. It's just not there. Even if I went to there. I'll tell you why it's not quite there. Because we didn't fill the mask. Anyway, it's not going to make much difference, I'm pretty sure. So, without, with, it, you're never really going to quite get there, because on a car, the problem is we want the differences, we want the reflections, we want the changes in tone, we want that metallic stuff, and what you're going to get with a color editor is this weird stuff here. So I think you're in a place where accept either the reflections or put something that blocks them, black flat or something like that across it, or control your lighting, and that's not going to work really in a museum. But at worst case scenario like this, I would be happier with something like this change, where I've still got it's still got the texture, it's still got all the stuff that's there, rather than going down this road, which I would argue doesn't necessarily make the reflection better. This just feels a bit more subtle. Ricardo, so something with a heartbeat. I feel like we're not doing landscape today. It feels very bizarre. Um, Carter's question was actually, I don't think Brian meant this as an insult, but that's a better result than I thought you'd do. It looked like a PS job. So, just to cover that, personally, I would actually take this into Photoshop if it were me, or Affinity or any other pixel editor. I think there's more scope for a lot of more cloning and more or less noticeable change. But you can get quite a long way, genuinely, in Capture One at this sort of stuff. This is really more a pixel editor thing, but yes, it can do. Ricardo's shot of a bird. You'll be surprised with this. Look at the before and after, from there to there. And if I look at the changes, so here we've got, this eye increase. Oh, you'll love. Oh, I forgot this tiny little thing. I think it was Alex that mentioned it at Capture One, and it didn't get the attention that it should have done. Have a look in your 16.6 beta, people. How often is it annoying that when you reset things? So let me have a look. I want to look side by side, this one and the one that Ricardo's done, but I don't want to change the crop because if I reset it, I lose everything. Really annoying. New. Reset. Click and hold the little button. Reset except composition. See? There's stuff for landscape people. Or non-people. Right. If I look at these two, I would say this is a really good edit. I personally prefer this version because I just prefer a more landscape orientation to a non-landscape shot. But I think actually the edit in this is almost spot on. I don't think there's much in there that I would change. The eye light on there is particularly nice. If I compare it to where you were before, it looked pretty dull. Yes, you've added quite a bit of punch on there. There's quite a bit of clarity and contrast in there. You got the brightness style brush in there. But genuinely on this, there's a lot of layers, by the way. But genuinely on this is a decent job. The background mask, so you've actually used the AI mask to work out the background and the one for the subject. What that means is all the changes that were done in those layers, if I then apply them to the same subject, the same picture, but another one, it will recreate my subject layer so I don't have to keep remasking every single time. It's actually really, really nice. Roger, I thought this was reset set composition is not new. When was it not in there? Weird. I must have missed it then because I was shown it. I was like, oh my god, this is new. We've got the reset crop separately and reset set composition. Anyway, well done everyone else if you saw it and I didn't, but I didn't. So we now have, in my head, we now have two other things. Reset does everything. It's the nuclear version. Reset crop just changes effectively the composition, but the crop most importantly. And then reset accept composition, I'm loving. But clearly I've missed it. So yeah, Paul uses it too. There we go. Every day's a learning day. What I would be careful with on this shot, and it's only one small thing to be careful with, Ricardo, which is, yes, increasing the contrast and the saturation and dropping down that background has given you more of a subject around the bird. But I do wonder whether this just feels a bit too cut out. Ryan's on my team. It's new to him. Ryan gets an extra point. Jimson. Well, it won't be 16.6.10. They've only done the first version of it. Maybe it's in 16.5.10. Yeah, maybe I missed that one, but there we go. So I worry when we see huge differences between subject and background because it either means you were really lucky with the light or you lit it. And the problem that I have is if I look at this dappled light in the background, it doesn't quite make sense that everything else is completely dark. So I do wonder about maybe wanting to go back to this background layer and maybe pull back some of this here. I think you've got another one on there, which is, where are we? There's a shadows darken, I think. No, it's not that one. Where are we? It's not the color mask. Maybe it's the whole image layer. That's weird. I can't actually find it now unless it's in the curve or the level. Let's have a look. Weird. Why can't we find that? It's in the curve. There we go. So if I were to undo this one, yeah, we get back to a normal background. Because this has got so much contrast on it, it just feels a little bit cooked. So all I would do is just bring this back a touch. And maybe, if anything, if you bring back this in terms of lightness, but then use your saturation or the opposite of and pull back that saturation, it just might feel a little more natural than that stark contrast between the front and the back. So yeah, Ricardo, your question was, would this edit work? Yeah, it's a nice edit. Going from there as well to there, nice move. I've got a weird spot here that might be added by accident. Let's have a look. It's been maybe, yeah. It's not on the raw. It is in there. So just be careful with that. I think that might be trying to fix a dust spot or something, but the problem is it's taken some feathers, so just be careful with that. You might want to find something like this area here and just do a quick heal so we don't, oops, so we don't notice that dot, but that's it. I'm conscious we've run out of time, but I want to just reiterate, I said we'd go through it and we haven't yet. We'll try and do it next week. I'm going to go through actually next week for everyone's benefit every single tool that we use as a landscape photographer, and we'll do it on an image. We'll do it on one of these images. So these are images that I took at dawn out in Yellowstone with, funnily enough, with David Grover. We will go through what every single tool can do or can positively or negatively affect in this image. We'll do that next week because I want people to understand that even though you might not have had a gimmick in this latest version, or its own tab or its own little icon, wonderful. The amount of tools that you have in here, which are indispensable to a landscape photographer, skin tone being one of them for skies randomly. It's called skin tone, but we use it for other things. Let's run through them and get you all to the same place, which is actually forget the new shiny toys. The stuff that you've currently got is probably not being utilized to its maximum extent already, and we can probably do a lot more than that with it. Okay. Brian, to your point, I nearly always apply a bit of iris enhance to wildlife. Yeah, I get that, and I think actually pulling out the eye in this was actually a really nice move. It really does make a difference, especially from there. It's almost gone reverse from being a negative dark eye to being a positive bright one. Right. So for all of you, if you wish to play, go download that beta. You can play with your heart's content. For some reason, I've got Brian's comment on there. It's freely available now. You can go into your account and capture one. You can download it. There's no NDA anymore. You can talk about it. You can explore it. You can play with it. But just bear in mind, it is a beta. It will expire at some point. So if you don't intend to move forward, be careful with your catalogs and keep them backed up. For those of you that want to upload files for next session, that's how to do it. You'll see all the logos and everything have changed around it. So paulreeferlive.wetransfer.com. Send them in. If you want to discuss all this stuff more and sharpen your pitchfork and everything else, then come into there, join along. And also remember, or don't forget, more importantly, in the meantime, you've got access to all of those masterclasses, which still have the old logo on for nostalgia, which will teach you a lot of other things, a lot of different topics, but all about, funnily enough, landscapes and cityscapes. So we will see you next week, same time, same place on here. But between then and now, that's how to keep up with us. Do so if you wish. We'll see you then. Cheers. Bye bye.